at least understand that there's a different set of behaviors at work, and you better know where you are. Otherwise, you will be implementing the stuff that could kill you.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Over the Wall. Today, I'm here with Jim McKelvey. And if you don't know Jim, amazing entrepreneur. Truly, I'll use the word entrepreneur. Was co-founder of Square with Jack Dorsey. Actually, funny enough, also like, I want to say Jack Dorsey's mentor, but like you got Jack his first job at your company when he was like,
Second, he used to work for his mom, so I was his first non-family job.
Exactly.
15.
Exactly, which I thought, it's, in itself, it's kind of interesting. We could talk about that. Recently, you've written a book called The Innovation Stack, and I just think it's such an awesome book. It just really digs into what it takes to build and be an entrepreneur, and what really is an entrepreneur. And maybe we can start there, Jim. First of all, thanks for being on the show.
Oh, thank you. And yeah, let's get our definitions down.
Like posers, we were talking about this before we got on.
Yeah,
There's like
you should actually go back and like do an outtake of what we did before they started the formal presentation, because Rob and I were doing this sort of secret entrepreneur's handshake, which is the people who have actually been through it sound nothing like the people who think they could do it. I find this in any, in any discipline. If you get the real insiders, there's just a subculture that others don't know. And a lot of people who are out there selling books and selling, I don't know, YouTube channels and other crap, haven't actually done it. And so their advice is sometimes comically bad. And it's frustrating because I think good, well-intentioned people take this advice and they say, I've got to do that. And then it doesn't work. And then they fault themselves. Well, they were just following the wrong person. So, Rob, you got your chops, God, 25 years. So
yeah, and you've obviously been through a lot too. And we talk about the different companies you built and everything. I think that's one of the key things. And maybe we start there. There's entrepreneurism is sort of the word gets thrown around and you define it. I think it's a good place to start of how you define it. What is an entrepreneur?
When I went to write the book, I needed a word to differentiate people who have businesses that are basically copies of other working businesses from people who are doing new stuff that might not work. And there is a vast difference in how you behave, whether you're on that side of the line where you can copy or you can't copy. And so I was looking, and we don't have a word in English for a business person who's doing something new. It turns out, however, that the original use of the word entrepreneur meant a business person who was trying something that probably wouldn't work and was likely to kill them. Okay, like that's why Schumpeter coined the word 150 years ago. And in order to write this book, I basically had to dust off this old definition because it's just different. If you're doing something where there are experts, where there is best practice, where there are competitors, you have a different playbook than if you're off in this sort of space where nobody's walked before and you're making stuff up as you go along and trying to figure it out in real time. And that's what I use the word entrepreneur to talk about. And that's all my book is about, because I figure we spend most of our times, alive being good copiers of other people's solutions. But occasionally we should be able to step across the line and do something entrepreneurial in the old definition. So, yeah.
I mean, I don't know about you, but I have, even in my industry, I'm in technology like you are. There are guys who've done very well, and they basically have copied something and made it cheaper and maybe something. But I have the respect isn't as high as like what you've done. And I don't know if you feel the same way. Like when you invent something totally new, obviously there's an industry that exists that needs to get changed, but you take a different lens and just like knock off someone's products and make them cheaper. I mean, what's your respect factor, or what do you think on that level?
I will admit to the same bias.
Okay.
They're the people who here's the thing. If you have a model that works and all you're doing is making one or two incremental refinements, there's a playbook for that, and it requires a certain amount of discipline. You got to do the same thing every day. You got to, study your competitors and all this stuff. But it's very difficult to learn something from a person like that. Where I find the tremendous learnings happen are the people who don't know what they're doing, not because they're ignorant, but because they can't know, because nobody has done that yet. And that's a different sort of behavior. So if you are, sort of voluntarily at the edge of what humanity has figured out, and you say, well, I need this solution that we haven't figured out yet, so I'm going to step across this line and then experiment and fail. And like, you have like great stories happen on the other side of this line. And the people who were there for first person recounts of those stories are cherished. And as a matter of fact, when I was writing the book, the funny thing about the book was that I did almost all historical research. So
That's
what
fine.
I was doing was I was trying to figure out how Square was able to survive an attack by Amazon, which was unprecedented. I mean, when Amazon attacks a startup, the startup dies.
Yeah.
That is 100% true up to the point where Amazon attacked Square and Square won. And I was thrilled, but what the hell happened? Like, why did it go this way? And I couldn't answer the question. So I started doing research. And I finally saw this group of companies throughout history who had been sort of similarly successful. I mean, they weren't attacked by Amazon, but like the Amazon of their day, or they were attacked by the US government, or there was a world war, or, like there was some sort of thing that should have killed this little infant, and the infant survives. It becomes this giant monster. And I was like, well, what was going on here? Unfortunately, the greatest stories were in the heads of the entrepreneurs who were long since dead. With one exception, I was able to interview Herb Kelleher.
I know. I wanted to tell you about, like, I saw he signed his, he was a chain smoker. And
Yeah.
I'm like, and I saw the box on the thing that I'm like,
Oh,
first of all,
it's right here. Like,
let me see it. Just let me see it. Cause like, I mean,
these are Herb smokes. I had them framed.
Yeah.
Largely because some cleaner came in here one day and threw them out. She was like, "Oh, McKelvey started smoking," and she threw the packs. I was like, "No, that was Herb's cigarettes." So yeah, Herb Kelleher's cigarettes.
I mean, that should go into the Museum of Entrepreneurship, right?
No, it's not leaving my office.
Like, but what I guess I wanted to ask you, because he died recently, and he passed away in like a year. It was recently, no? Or
yeah, it was a year and a half ago.
Like, but you met him before, and he's a hero of mine. He's a hero of, like. So what was it like? Like, what was he like? Maybe if we could I'm just curious of as a person. Obviously I've read so much about him, his books, but like, what was it like? And then you went to him with this book idea, and that
No. I didn't have a book idea. That was a homework assignment from her.
Okay.
So I didn't want to write a book. I wanted to figure out what it was. It was just sort of this self-indulgent personal thing. Like, I just couldn't answer the question for myself. And so I stitched together what I thought was this answer. And I needed to talk to somebody who'd lived through it, right? Not some poser, not somebody who had been, thinking about it a lot. I wanted somebody who had firsthand experience. And Herb was still alive, and I got to sit down with him. And it was one of the greater thrills of my life. And I met at heads of state. I met a lot of really, sort of hotshot folks. I've never been as impressed by anybody as Herb Kelleher. Because here's a guy who was super fun and dynamic. He was in his 80s. He was changed. He did 2 packs of Cool Menthols while we were together in his office. And so, I'm excited. I'm on adrenaline. I guess I'm also on like nicotine, right? Because it's like we're all, there's this cloud of smoke in Herb's office. But the way the book happened was, I basically said, look, here's all this stuff that happened to me at Square and all these other companies. And I was like, I think you lived through it too. And then I just like, tell me. And he just talked for like 2 hours. And he was like, he started getting excited. He was like, yeah, this is the same thing that happened to us at Southwest. And we looked at it a little differently, but he was like, and then he said, like, how are you going to share this with the world? Like, what's your plan, Jim, for taking this information and not just like sitting on it, but, and I'd already written a couple of books, so I didn't want to do that again. Out of Herb's office on this sort of nicotine high, I had this great idea. I was like, I'm going to do a graphic novel.
Yeah, I saw it. No.
So I spent like the next year and a half writing all of my stuff in as a cartoon, like it was a cartoon. And actually, it was a good cartoon because like a lot of those stories that happen when you don't know what you're doing are epic. Like the
Yeah.
failures. There's like murder, nudity. I mean, this is a business book now, but I mean, I've got nudity, murder, like all sorts of destruction of a major city. Like there's just stuff that went down. World War, Nazis, got some of them in there. Like these are great stories. And I'm thinking cartoon. So, and I'm thinking Herb's going to love this. So I'm working on this year and a half. I finally get ready to do Herb's chapter, right? So I call him up to tell him what's going on. He hates the idea, just hates it. And and all he said to me was, he said, I can't tell you not to do it, but what I can ask you to do is leave me out.
Wow. Wow. That would be hurtful. I mean, that's like, yeah, that's the end of that book.
That was the end of it. I scrapped the whole thing. I went back and I rewrote the whole thing as text. I mean, it's still irreverent. I mean, there's a really dirty joke. Well, you've read the book. I mean, like
Yeah.
there's some stuff in there. But Herb was right. And here's the reason that I deeply wanted to thank him for that, which I never got to because he died before I finished the actual book. Um, the stories that I was telling in pen and ink were hero stories. And
Yeah.
it's not that I was telling hero stories, I was telling everyman stories, but I was using this medium that is reserved for superheroes, right? Like who are the subjects of comics books? They're people with superpowers, right? Folks that can do stuff that you and I can't do. I mean, Rob, you're a normal guy. I'm a normal
Yeah.
guy. I got back pain,
Yeah.
like, you probably have some weird
Yeah.
fungus. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, but like, we're
We're
not
human.
superheroes.
We're humans. Yeah.
Yeah. Telling a story as a graphic novel makes entrepreneurs seem like they have some quality that we don't. And what I had discovered was, precisely the opposite, which was these were fairly normal people who were in these abnormal situations and then discovered this thing that I call the innovation stack, which is just a fairly simple series of moves, but it allows you to have, sort of superpowers like Batman has. Like Batman doesn't have any like physical, and you didn't get irradiated by some crazy exploding star. Like he's just a rich guy with a bunch of tools, right? And I think the entrepreneurs that I met were more like Batman. They somehow discovered all these tools, and then they went off to do great stuff.
But
And
like
so,
you were a bat. When you think about you as Batman, as the character, let's stay there. You don't have you start square because you see a problem in when you're trying to take a credit card, the glass boy, and you've told that story. Like,
yeah,
so, but I guess I want to ask you something, which is you didn't have any reason to be involved with this. Do you know what I'm saying? Like you didn't have an expertise.
no,
You didn't
I had
go
no
to
skill
you
at
didn't
all.
you didn't know payments from.
No,
I mean, you were in the
nothing.
software business, but I'm just saying, like, I don't know how you like think about as an entrepreneur, like how did you have the balls to go like I'm just gonna like build a payment system? You know,
Well,
like I tell entrepreneurs too, like none of us had expertise. We learn. But like this is a big one. Like you can't take an Amex card. You're like, you know what? I'm going to solve that problem so I can sell more glass blowing, art. I mean,
so
I don't get the connection. I mean, I'm saying like explain the connection. Like, how did you get there? Because most
so
people would just go like, I can't take the credit card. Okay, let me go blow more glass.
right. Well, they don't harbor as much deep-seated resentment as I do, maybe. I'm probably an angrier person, but the fact is, ignorance is a good substitute for balls. Okay, like if you know it's dangerous, then you got to have a lot of balls. If you're so ignorant that you don't know what you're about to get into, then you don't need to be brave. I'm not a brave guy. Like, but I'm good at being ignorant. I'm good at sort of ignoring stuff or not knowing and just charging ahead. And I've had, I guess, enough success figuring out as I'm going that I don't think of it as balls, because I see myself in situations where other people are like, I'll go, and I'm like, I'm not. Um, but in this case, it was a case of one, I was really upset because I'd been at receiving end of an abusive relationship for over a decade as a small merchant. Because I did take credit cards. We have Visa and MasterCard were, staples
Yeah.
of our studio. And I knew the game, and I knew that the ways they would rip me off. And there were some really sort of toxic behaviors. A lot of those have actually been flushed out of the market simply because Square now exists and people can't get away with it. But back in 2009, I mean, I was freshly scarred from a new thing. And then of course Jack Dorsey, Jack had recently left Twitter, and he asked me to start a new company with him. And Jack and I had no idea what we were going to do. So Jack and I were kicking around for ideas, and all of a sudden I get this problem that's personal to me. So now I've got all this energy, this like personal, like I want to right this wrong. And I'm thinking, hey, with Jack and me working together, we can probably do something. And that was it. Like we didn't know that we could. We didn't know that anyone would want it. And it was really a case where we were doing something that hadn't been done before. So the fact that neither one of us were experts didn't matter because nobody was an expert in what Square was doing. Like there were literally no experts in that area of payments.
So you met Jack when he was like, you went into his mother's coffee shop and get coffee on your first company, and then you needed some interns and stuff to do something that was like quickly, and she volunteered her son, who's
Yes.
Jack Dorsey. He's like 15 years old. You bring him in, and that starts your friendship with him, I guess.
Yeah.
From there, I mean, I never met him. Obviously, I admire what he's done. He gets a lot of criticism
Sure.
as a CEO of a public company because, first of all, he's two CEOs, right?
Yeah, he gets double the criticism.
And people can't figure it out. And he's being attacked all the time. And he wears the beard, and he's going to Africa, and now he believes in crypto. And as an entrepreneur, I'm like, okay, he's an entrepreneur, but what's your perspective on Jack? I mean, he's a friend of yours, so I mean, give an insider view, like if you feel comfortable, of like what's he like? Because people admire him, but then other people are highly critical, and that's part of being an entrepreneur. Maybe I don't know.
So what I would say is that for the people who are highly critical about Jack, it is probably because he is an entrepreneur. It is like you're not going to be highly critical of somebody who's just singing with the rest of the crowd. You're probably going to be highly critical of somebody who is pushing a new idea that you don't agree with or agree with yet, or somebody who is standing up for something that might be unpopular until it becomes popular, or maybe it never becomes popular. But Jack's never been somebody who has had to validate his opinions with the herd. And so I don't know that the criticism bothers him as much as it would bother a normal person who is constantly having to seek validation from their environment, which
But
I
I
think
think
we all do that to some extent. I do that. It's not a criticism. Like that's how normal people behave. Jack, I think, has cultivated an ability to think independently without having to first, look to both sides of him and make sure that there are other people with him.
But you talk about this. I think I want, let's use him as a beacon for a second, because you talk about like being in the wall or the proverbial wall, or, it's this concept of like the entrepreneur having to go outside of the wall, and you're going to take a lot of criticism, my assumption. So what do you think entrepreneurs need to like do? Because it's hard to hear you suck, or you're different, or you're not going to make it, or that's hard. We're human beings in the end. Like I said, we're not, even though we want to be Batmans, we're just humans. Like, how did you deal with it?
Yeah, and I'm sure Batman got a lot of crap from his family, like
For wearing the outfit, wearing the funny outfit.
like what are you doing? Like you can tell he's a bachelor, right? Batman doesn't have like a family and kids, and like, no, get off the bat pole, like Jesus, don't touch that. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine like
He comes home at night and his wife's like,
imagine
like,
Pack and play down in the bat cave? Like it's just not going on, right? So but here's the thing. The people who love you the most are the ones who are going to tell you to get back in the herd. Not because they're jealous but it's because they're genuinely afraid for your well-being. So if you leave a stable job to go start something, that's risky. If you leave a stable job to start something that's never worked before, the people who care most about you are going to say, Rob, what the hell are you doing? Nobody wants chatbots. Nobody wants like no. There's low cost labor overseas. Why do we need like all that stuff that you see as the solution to some unsolved problem? The rest of people see as something they can't even comprehend because it doesn't exist yet. So how are you going to survive? And the people who care most about you are going to be the ones who sort of try to pull you back. And this is the thing that, I sort of wanted to convey in the book, which is, look, you don't ever have to step across the line and do something innovative or new. Never have to. You can be super successful your whole life. You can be a successful businessman. We can call you an entrepreneur using the sort of modern definition of the term. You can be lauded and popular in every superlative. However, you may once or twice in your life run up against a problem that humanity has not solved yet. And the first time anyone solves that, they're not going to be an expert. They're not going to have a playbook. They're not going to have the support of their friends. They're going to have to choose to do something that hasn't been done before. Or maybe they will have to choose to do something because they're just in a tough situation. That's the only way they can survive. But I wanted to talk about what it's like on that side of the line, just in case my readers or my listeners at some point find themselves in that position. And I'm just hoping that, if I sell enough books and enough people share the ideas, actually, I don't need to sell the books. Just like copy the book. Penguins are going to kill me for this. Steal the book. I don't care if you steal the book. I'll give you everything I can give. I just want more people willing to step across that line, because that's where the solutions come from. You don't think we have a ton of problems? You think the current technology is going to solve all our problems? It ain't. We're going to need people who do crazy stuff, to do stupid stuff, who are willing to step across that line. And probably most of them are going to fail, but the ones who succeed are going to drag the world forward. And I just want more people doing that. I don't want people succumbing to this training that look, you've been trained to copy your whole life. That's what they teach you in school. That's what they teach you in business. That's what your parents and everybody is going to be reinforcing your ability to do what others have done. And it's really hard to resist that indoctrination, which you've done your entire existence, if you don't have a little bit of perspective on, McKelvey told me right now that my friends are going to be telling me I'm stupid and I'm going to feel really uncomfortable and I'm scared and I'm, having these weird pains in my gut. Yeah, that's kind of what I expect to be here.
Do you have a secret? Once you step that line, there's a mental game on there. There's me getting someone to buy do you have a secret, or you hop the line and then what do you do mentally to be like, okay, I'm just going to do the one thing to reinforce or whatever it is, so you don't quit? What have you done?
So I got 3 chapters on this, but I'll give you my best one. Okay. And again, you don't have to read the book. It's on my blog. You can download an article on this for free. JimMcKelvey.com. It's up there somewhere. So I call it energy management. And the way I look at it is this. Every day I wake up with 5 or 6 energy units. We'll call them whatever you want. I was trying to explain this to my son the other day. He was like, "Oh, it's like hit points." Okay, fine. It's hit points, right? So, I got 5 hit points when I wake up, and then I get stuck in traffic. I get pissed off. I get to the office. Now I'm down to 3, right? But then, if some good stuff happens and I have lunch and I get up to 7, but that's the amount of power that I have at any given moment. And at any point where my score drops to 0, I'm out. I'm done. I'm going to fail. If a task that I'm attempting takes 4 units of energy and I'm sitting there with 3, I am by definition going to fail. There's none of this, give it 110%. No. I got 4. I got 3. It requires 4. Dead. So what I try to do is everything I possibly can to not deplete myself or to boost myself. So crazy stuff like no social media. I don't do it. I'm sorry. It's not that I have anything against it. It's that I can't personally handle it. No hard drugs. Can't I don't watch news. Oh, here's one that pisses off all my friends. I don't watch any network news. Zero news intake. I won't tell you my whole list, but I do these things because what I found over time is that, at the end of listening to a great segment on NPR about what the hell's going wrong that I can't do anything about, I feel just a little bit depleted. So
But do people do people ever deplete you?
oh
Have you
yes,
ever had people you worked with? Like we all, even though you're the person you're hiring, people like you're an entrepreneur, it's your company. But have you had people come through and you're like, man, they just take my 5 to a 2?
yeah, I do, and I don't see those people anymore.
Yeah.
It's really hard. I mean, it's really it's tough, but that puts me in a position, hopefully, where I can be prepared if something requires real energy.
I feel like sometimes we forget that the people we work with, especially as an entrepreneur, when you're dealing with enough uncertainty and all that, like you want people to excite you. I think sometimes we think we got to excite everyone else, but you also like you feed off of people, and sometimes if you get people that are just not there with you, it just makes it hard to do your work at your best. I think. I don't know if you've had the same experience.
Oh yeah, and sometimes they're my CEOs because, like, I don't run my companies.
Yeah.
So every once in a while, I'll get a CEO who's like great up to a point where I can't stand them, and yeah, I'm pretty ruthless. I tell them in advance. I mean, this is not sort of a surprise to anybody, but
Yeah.
they've got to be able to keep at a certain level, and if they can't, then we're going to part ways in probably an ugly manner. Um,
Like how
Usually
ugly?
because it's unfair to everybody else to have somebody who's not in the right spot.
Yeah. The thing is, do you ever keep them around too long? One of the things I tell entrepreneurs is
I
like,
always keep them around too long.
this is what I tell people. Have you ever seen anyone change? Like you know in your head, this person's kind of served the purpose and they're not positive anymore on the level. And did they ever go back to making it, or did you
No,
ever keep it?
no. It always takes me too long, and I'm shockingly fast by sort of normal standards, and I always feel like, oh man, I could have done that a month ago.
So let me go back into the book, like the center of the book. You've got, because it's based on the title, the innovation stack. And I wanted to hit 2 points. One is obviously Amazon decides they're going to like rip you off and try to beat you. Then you also have Visa, MasterCard, and all these guys that they don't really want you in the game, I would think, when you get started, although you write about when you met them and as they sign up. But then you also do the Bank of Italy, IKEA, Southwest Airlines, and talk about each story is the hero's journey. And there is a fight in there. There is a fight, and the industry wants to destroy them and get rid of them. That's what you've shown in these stories you've told. But for you, when you were marching in there, what made the difference? What do you think made the difference? And obviously, it's at the heart of the book, but I just want to kind of set up a softball for you a little bit here.
Yeah, that's a beautiful pitch right over the plate. Um,
100%.
uh, Look, all of these firms and hundreds of others had this thing called an innovation stack, and it's not this sort of seminar like innovation, and it's not like the one big breakthrough. What it turns out to be is this sort of weirdly organic adaptation to a harsh environment where you're doing not one, not two, but in Square's case 14, in Southwest case 20 things that are absolutely different from everybody else. And so Square's a great example because I lived through it, but I think Southwest is probably the best example because airlines is the most commoditized business in the world. I mean, they all fly Boeing metal or Airbus metal. They're all going to be, dealing with the same fuel prices and restrictions and FAA. I mean, it's crazy to think that a company could innovate in the airline industry. And yet here, little Southwest comes up and does not one, not two, but like 20 things differently. They build this innovation stack. And the result of that is to take this tiny little company that should have died, and it becomes the biggest in their business. I mean, it's the dominant carrier in the United States. It's the most profitable carrier by any measure in history. Like it's got so many superlatives, and it's at its core it was this innovation stack, and that's what got Herb, so excited about this. Is that he'd lived through this, but he didn't put the context on it the way I had. But we were speaking the same language, and so this innovation stack it's this thing you can't go out and buy. You have to build it, and you have to build it in a world where you can't copy. And that's sort of the thing that differentiates people in the book who, or from the companies that I study from the companies that I just ignore.
Yes.
Um, and I don't want people to get the message. A lot of people can listen to this, they're not going to read the book and they think, oh, McKelvey says don't copy anything. No, 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 no. What McKelvey says is copy as much as you possibly can. Find something that works, copy it. That is your best odds of success. However, be open to the idea that at some point you will find a problem that has not already been solved. And in that case, you don't get to copy. And are you willing to try all this stuff and have all the problems when you can't? In Southwest case, their big innovation came when they ran out of money. They had 4 planes. They had to sell it down to 3. And they were like, well, could we keep the same schedule with only 3 planes? And they were like, yeah, if we can turn around at 10 minutes at the gate. Now, turn time of a plane at a gate is an hour.
Yeah.
Okay. Get the fuel on, get the passengers off, get the baggage, wipe the bugs off the windshield. The pilot's got to do walk. There's all this stuff you got to do. It's theoretically possible to do it in 10 minutes, but nobody had ever done it. And so Southwest decides that that's what they're going to do, and they do it. Okay. And in order to do that, they had to do 10 other things differently. Okay. So to hit this turn time goal, they have to board differently. They have to have different types of seating. They have to have the pilots behave differently. The flight attendants behave differently. The baggage handlers, they had to standardize on the plane because all this stuff has to work together. Their innovation stack, all these things. And then all of a sudden, when they work together, you got the most efficient carrier in the world. You got the lowest prices, lowest cost. I mean, magic happens when you build one of these innovation stacks. And in Square's case, that magic protected us from Amazon. So we were sitting on 14 things. Amazon, I would say, copied 3 of them.
But that's what I thought was interesting. It's that if you truly innovate, the external world can't see below the iceberg, right? Like
Right.
that's what you showed. And I think it's a real good lesson for entrepreneurs. If you write out what those things are that are truly unique, even though the world sees the finished product out in the market, they can't see below of all the stuff you've done to deliver that experience, whatever that experience is.
Yeah, and you look at this.
Like
If
even
you
Herb Keller, they couldn't copy her. I guess JetBlue, as you wrote, did later, but the other airlines tried TED and all that other stuff. You said they couldn't figure out what the 14 or what the 22 were. They just saw like free drinks and people with being happy, being kooky. I think that's what they saw.
United Airlines had 30 years to study Southwest, and they still got it wrong. And it wasn't like Southwest and United didn't share employees. Like you could hire somebody, like you could go work for Southwest. They had all this ability to do it. But as I go through in the book, there is something fundamentally different about evolving an innovation stack in a harsh environment and then sort of synthetically copying something that's already working. The world of copying is fundamentally different. And I don't want to bore you guys with a bunch of math here, but the math just works out differently. And if you're copying certain,
Well, what's the math? Because I'm interested because I feel the same way. Like the math doesn't work out on copying midterm or long term, maybe short term. It does create some, but what's the math in your mind? Like, what is that?
Well, so the simple math, which we can do without like putting your listeners to sleep, is think of the odds of success of any individual act. Okay. And let's say it's an 80% chance of success, which is a pretty good chance. Like if I'm going to do something and I've got a 4 out of 5 chance of succeeding, then I've got an 80% chance of success if I'm doing one thing. If I'm doing 2, we're going to square 0.8. So I'm now at a 0.64 chance of success. And with each successive iteration there, my chance of success is going to geometrically decrease to the point where if I'm trying to do 10 things, I'm less than 8% chance of success. Okay. And that's with an 80% thing I can do. Now you say, well, I'm really good. I can do things with 90%. You're still going to decay. Like you're not going to be able to do 20 things perfectly the first time. Okay. Now you sit there and say, well, what if I have enough time to learn them all? And I'm saying, well, maybe that's possible. But again, we get into the sort of math of this in the book. It's just like, it doesn't seem to happen in the world. Okay. And I take apart companies like Southwest and, the JetBlue example is a great example because Southwest, and Herb and I actually talked about this. I didn't put it in the book, but it's actually on the tapes with him. How frustrated he was with how Southwest was not responding to Spirit. You know,
Mm.
because Spirit and some of the other airlines that were like super low cost, you know, I mean, seats that absolutely don't recline, and a charge for like they charge you for the oxygen. If the mask ever
Yeah.
dropped, there'd be like some credit card reader on, probably a square reader, right?
Toilet paper. Yeah.
Yeah.
Toilet paper. Yeah.
It's um, Southwest abandoned a lot of the entrepreneurial behavior after Herb retired, and after that time, they enjoyed this huge Wall Street success where they were basically milking these advantages that they had. Makes them look great in the market, but ultimately, I think it undermined the long term success of the company. Not that
Don't you
Southwest
think?
is in trouble, but
Don't you think Apple? Like, I don't know what you think, but I think post Steve Jobs, there
yeah,
hasn't been a ton of innovation. Although they're Wall Street, obviously, they're almost. I think they're a $2 trillion company now. Like under Tim Cook, they've done really well. But like, I don't get it. You know?
well,
Do you get
name
that?
something interesting that Apple's done since Steve was alive. And remember, Steve had 5 projects in the lab that you didn't know about.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, like the
So
watch in the lab. I think he died before. I mean, those things were going out the door.
yeah, I mean, I deeply miss Steve Jobs because my question is, okay, this guy had balls. I mean, he wasn't like this ignorance. He was on the balls ignorance thing. I do the ignorance. He did like Steve. Imagine if he had $2 trillion of resources, what he'd be doing. I mean, we'd
Yeah,
be trying to, I don't think Apple would have a space company, right? I think Steve would have some insane thing. And you'd sit there and go, whoa, oh, yeah. And the problem is we never got to see that next round.
I know.
And I'm heartbroken that we lost somebody like that before he really had a massive war chest. Because if you gave Steve, you know, 700 million of or 700 billion of free cash flow or whatever the hell I have, this guy, I don't know what it is. I don't follow him, but it would be fun.
Yeah,
And I
I
don't see that DNA at the company because it
I
can't
don't.
look.
But
Cook,
you said big companies. You wrote about this, like big companies, because they're most. And Tim Cook's a good example. He came out of like logistics and manufacturing. They become very process oriented, which delivers a big, expansive, scalable company. But it doesn't. Innovation doesn't fit into a process like that, right? That's what you were kind of saying.
so it's sort of like my beef against generational wealth. Um, like I know a lot of rich people who made it themselves, and I know a lot of rich people who inherited it. The rich people who inherited it aren't actually rich
Yeah,
because two things. One, they've got this guilt that they really like their job is to not screw it up. Like, don't be such an idiot that you blow it for the next generation. Like, we want to see the grandkids at the country club. So it's your job to make sure they're all. Secondly, they don't have the swagger that comes from having existed in that world on the other side of the line long enough to have, like, they're not in the club. They couldn't quite do it. And because of that, they become conservative and they say, well, they got a lot of money, but like, no, they don't because it's grandpa's money, right? And so I look at Elon, right? Elon's a great example of a guy who's really rich because he made it himself and then he made even more. Okay. And now he's doing nutty stuff with it. But you know what? It's his money. Elon can go in and tell you, we're going to do this. I'm going to take my car and I'm going to make it orbit Mars. And you know what people say at that meeting? Well, I guess we build a bigger rocket. Like they take him seriously. Now, imagine Tim Cook. Tim's a great guy.
yeah,
Very smart guy. Is he smarter than Elon Musk? Who knows? Can he come into the Apple board of directors and say, guess what we're going to do?
yeah. I don't see it.
Can't do that. So you got to have so, if you're first generation, if you're the person who actually did it, you get this extra little bit of leeway with the world that allows you to do even stupider stuff. Right. So, I think that there's like, you can't fault a guy like Tim for running Apple the way he's running Apple. I think he's running Apple very well.
Yeah.
He couldn't do what Jobs did.
Yeah.
Jobs used to ride an elevator with somebody, say, "What do you do for Apple?" If they didn't give him a good answer, he would take their employee badge.
Yeah.
He made people cry. I mean, the number 6 employee at Apple now works at Square, and he told us some tales. I mean, this was not a pleasant man at all times, but very effective.
Oh yeah. Well, there's a question I ask every entrepreneur on the program, which is that, do you have a voice in your head that's like not such a positive voice,
Yeah.
but you're like fighting it? Like you're like, and part of the fight is the internal fight against that pain in the ass voice.
Yeah, and the voice talked to my kid self. Like, my voice always refers to me as Jimmy, like this 10 or 12-year-old kid who's really afraid and got beat up a lot and has all these problems. Like, that's that voice. That's what that voice addresses. Um, I listen to it sometimes. Um, I have trained it a little bit over the years to be a little more positive. The voice that I wish I had in my head was my father's. My father was this phenomenal man who was quite unlike me, very calm, thoughtful. He had this presence that I will never have, and it's heartbreaking. I got to spend so many years with my dad, and I never quite learned how to do all those sort of, I don't know. He just had this way about him. I can't even verbalize it.
He was a scientist, your dad, right?
He's a scientist, yeah. And an administrator. Like, all the stuff that, like, whenever I get into, this is my joke, like, whenever I get into trouble, I say, well, what would my dad do in this situation? And the answer is, oh, my dad wouldn't be in this situation, right? He would not have put himself in a situation where he had to ask, what the hell do I do now?
Is he alive? Is your father alive?
No,
Or
he died about a year and a half ago. So
so
great.
you got to see your successes.
Some of them. Yeah. Yeah.
Was he
Um,
proud?
he was very, but not openly, right?
Like,
He was very proud, but it turns out all my friends would tell, or my parents would tell me, oh, he would talk about you when you weren't there.
yeah, I had a similar situation. My father passed about 5 years ago.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And he was an entrepreneur, but small companies up. I was in this family like up and down. One day we had a Jaguar as a kid. Next day we had a Ford Pinto. I mean, literally, it was like this extreme. It was like, and so I
The
learned
Jaguar
about.
actually behaves like a Pinto. Like, if you had the right Jaguar,
Yeah,
they're
it was a piece of
mechanically
shit.
similar.
That Jaguar was a piece of shit. It broke down so much. I can't tell you. Like my dad, finally, we had a little money to get a car, and he buys this thing, and the day he brings it to the house, it breaks down.
That's a
It's the
Jaguar.
It was like the perfect. And I saw my dad like, but then we had a Pinto because his company went under. But I remember when he passed away, a friend came up to me, and I was close to my dad, competitive at sometimes. I felt he was with me, but I felt the same way. But a friend said to me, "Your father told me once you'll be on the cover of magazine. You'll be on the cover of Time magazine one day. He knows you'll make it there." I was like, he never said that to me. So I don't know if your dad sounds like your dad was there, old school, like kind of kept it in. So
He
not
was
to
very
get on
quiet,
that. Yeah.
but a great inspiration. And as far as that little voice in my head, you know, I think half that voice is my mom. And mom died 35 years ago, 33 years ago, something like that. It's over 30 years ago. I mean, I lost my mom very early. But she was super tough. Like, punch her in the face, that just made her mad. You know, um, New Yorker, just very different from my father. But she was the one that was always like in my head when I was failing or when something was going wrong. It was,
So you think it's your part mom voice in
I
the
think
head?
so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey man, do
Yeah.
I owe you for like a therapy session here? Like, this is kind of helpful.
I'm going to do a little Oprah here. I'll pull a little Oprah. Just tell me how you feel.
Oh, there's something under my seat. Yeah.
So I usually ask also a question of like, it's first of all, the book's awesome. I told a guy at my company, we have a project running right now. We have a couple of them we have entrepreneurs at the company. Like, I love it. But And I said, read this book, because he's working on some product stuff. And I said, you got to read this book around small business. So first of all, the book's awesome. But if you
Thank
could
you.
give like one or two, pieces of advice, because like once again, a lot of entrepreneurs listen to the program. What would those two like one or two real nuggets be?
Well, first, and this is a mistake I made for 2 decades before I even, I mean, I started Square without knowing what the heck I was doing. And then it was only in researching the book and talking to Herb that I got this clear idea that there is this line, and this line exists between the behavior when we can copy and when we have to innovate. And the behaviors on the different sides of the line are different. So a mistake I made again and again and again is I'd have a problem in one of my companies, and I'd go to one of my very successful friends and I'd be like, hey, Rob, I got this problem. What are you doing in the same situation? And you'd be like, Jim, I know what to do. And you tell me what to do, right? And then I go do it and it would blow up in my face. And I'd be like, man, I must be such an idiot because I couldn't implement this solution that was handed to me. Well, it turns out that solution worked depending on which side of the line it was for, right? So if you gave me an entrepreneurial solution, what I had was a business problem, it would kill me. Conversely, if you gave me a business solution, what I had was an entrepreneur's problem, it would also kill me. So I ended up, losing a lot of body parts in the execution of really good advice that was contextually inappropriate for the side of this line, and I didn't even recognize it. So, and this is why it was so maddening when I started to write the book, that I realized that, look, the English language doesn't even have a word to differentiate what side of the line you're on. Like, we can't even have a discussion about it because, guys like Herb know about it, and guys like, we can't even talk about it because there's no word in the language. So I had to dust off a century-old definition of entrepreneur, which is a horrible, difficult to spell, Frenchish weirdo word that, but like, that's how low I had to stoop to even have a conversation about this. So if you don't read the book, that's fine. But like, at least understand that there's a different set of behaviors that work, and you better know where you are. Otherwise, you will be implementing the stuff that could kill you. Or
Right.
if not kill you, it'll throw away an advantage that you could have had for decades. That's the heartbreaking thing. When you see an entrepreneurial company go into copy mode unnecessarily because they don't realize what the innovation stack can do, and they haven't worked through the math and stuff, and then they end up blowing what could be a century-long domination of an industry, in 10 years. So that's sort of a piece of advice one. I think the second piece would be that there is no checklist for this. Because, and again, I regret having to have written a business book to get this out, because I think business books are really part of the problem, because most of them contain these platitudes of, oh, here's a checklist for what you're supposed to do, and don't get my book because you expect there to be this sort of 4-step magic solution. You are really not guaranteed to succeed if you're living in the world of the entrepreneur. And you have to accept that at the beginning. You have to accept
you're not guaranteed. Let's make clear. You're not guaranteed. If you're going to take this journey, this life purpose, you're not guaranteed to succeed.
Correct. So, I mean,
I don't know if people realize that. Because they get feedback loops that it ain't working out, and they're like, okay, I got to quit. Like versus like working through it.
The guys who published Good to Great, which was one of my favorite books, refused to even take my book because it didn't have a checklist in it. Like the author for what it was, HarperCollins.
Jim Collins?
Yeah, well, HarperCollins was published Jim's book, and I love Good to Great. I actually have Jim gave me one of the draft versions of Good to Great when he was writing it. That's how long I go back with that book. I read it before it was published, right?
Wow.
And that book, I was so excited to maybe, be published by Jim's house, right? And I talked to this lady, and she wouldn't even read my book because it didn't have checklists. And I was like, wait a second, my book discusses stuff that's never been done before. How the hell am I supposed to have a checklist? And by the way, how many items am I going to have on that checklist? And you know what she said? 5 to 7. She's like, we need at least 5 and no more than 7. And if you could rewrite it so that we have 5 to 7, a checklist that somebody could like really implement and take your knowledge. And I was like, girl, but of course she's been publishing business books for 2 decades. She's into this copy crap. But it was like, you don't get a guaranteed success. The closest you'll come to a guaranteed success is copy somebody else who's had success, or better yet, copy 20 people who have all succeeded doing the same darn thing. And then guess what? You're going to have 20 competitors, but you will likely succeed. The journey of the entrepreneur is different. It's fundamentally different, and at least recognize it, because then you won't have this sort of double whammy when you come to that line. So when you come to the line, there's nothing that's going to make you comfortable. There's nothing that's going to guarantee your success, but you will at least not be shocked at the experience that you're about to have. If you're aware of it, on top of all those other headaches, there's the total surprise of going, what the hell's wrong with me? Why am I here? I mean, I at least want you to be able to say, oh yeah, McKelvey warned me that this was probably what it was going to be like. And sure enough,
I have a mental trick that if it's really bad, like if you're over the line and you're really hitting the wall, I mean, it's bad. The last resort for me is death. The last resort is that I'm not going to be on my, first of all, we all are going to die. So this is one only certain thing you and I have in common right now.
Yep.
So then I tell myself, I'm not going to be sitting on my deathbed and like wondering, what if I just would have taken the risk? And then the other part is, I said, when they bury me, no one's going to be talking at the funeral about like all the stuff I screwed up. Like you very rarely at a funeral, like, by the way, he tried to do this thing in business and it didn't work. And then he did that. Like you never hear the eulogy. So I'm always thinking like, either way, you don't want to be at the end of your life not knowing the answer to the question. Like, would have it worked? That's kind of, by the way, I'll tell you, that's when I hit those days, I'm like, I got to go over this cliff for a second into the unknown, because I don't want to not know the answer.
Yeah, that's a great trick.
I mean, that's an extreme trick, but that's where, so I don't know if you.
Well, I mean, I can't think about death too long and stay motivated.
No, I'm not. You can't stay in that. You're not staying there like, oh, I'm going to die till I feel sick.
No. Because then you're like, well, what the hell? I guess I'll go on Facebook. What the hell? But I don't. I mean, that's some powerful medicine. That's some stuff that, I mean, I love it. I love it. It's I'd take that with an eyedropper, not with a shot glass, but yeah, I can see it working.
So I'll ask you, I have, I guess, one ending question, sort of. I could probably talk to you for a couple hours, but I don't know if you believe like in heaven or not, but let's say Herb's up in heaven. Okay. Entrepreneurial. He's with us. Let's say Herb's with us, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's just say he showed up for the show because you're here.
I am picturing Herb in a cloud, but that's how I picture him on the earth anyway. He was always
in a smoky cloud.
He was always in the cloud.
So if Herb could be here with us, or he's here spiritually, like, what would he say to us?
Probably stop talking about yourselves. I don't know. Or maybe he'd you know what? I think Herb would be laughing with us. He had so much fun. He took me out to lunch. He smoked. Like, this was in 2017. You couldn't smoke in Dallas in 2017 unless you were Herb Kelleher. You go into the restaurant, you're Herb Kelleher. They sat on an ashtray. He smoked throughout lunch. The guy sitting there apologizing to me that he's not drinking because it's February and that's the shortest month of the year, so he regenerates his liver during the month of February. And he'd be having a good time. He'd be trading stories, and he had some amazing stories. Like, I just wanted to spend as much time as I could, just listening and listening and listening.
Can you share one? Like, what was one that you can be like, that we haven't heard?
Oh God.
Maybe it's a little racy.
I tell you the flavor of them, which is like, we didn't know. The good story is one where the hero is ill-equipped to deal with the calamity, right? Nobody wants to hear a story of success. They're boring. They want to hear a time when, both engines blew up and you still had to land the plane, or, there was a strike, or there was some crazy thing. That's fun. And if you think about it, at least in business, there's nothing I do in business that will literally kill me. There's really only one activity in my life that will kill me right now. It's flying planes. I fly planes. And if you screw that up, you die. Okay.
Yeah.
So don't ever get close to doing something that'll kill you. But my God, what Herb was able to do with the most boring industry in the world, the most commoditized industry in the world, and the way he was able to do it, he had phenomenal stories, and he was laughing. So I think that's probably the big thing that he would be doing if he was with us. He'd be laughing because your failures make you funny, and he loved laughing.
Yeah, I will say that it's only years later that you can laugh. You're like back in the things that seem so horrible at the time, that you look back, you go, "Oh my God," because if you made it forward, you're like, "That's funny that we even had that terrible thing happen." It's usually not funny at the time, obviously, but I can appreciate how Herb would laugh about this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I remember before my son learned to cry, like when he was a little kid and he used to fall down. Like one of the first phrases he learned in English was "that didn't hurt," because I taught him that. And this kid was like, he could fall down a flight of stairs and be bleeding, and he'd be like, "That didn't hurt," you know. He then went off to preschool and learned to cry, because at preschool you fall down and and so I think of that as like this life lesson, because I whine and complain about all sorts of stuff that I really don't know if it's that bad. And I think, wow, I wonder if I could get back to that that state where my, son was when he was, about 2 or 3, and, didn't cry when he skinned up his knee.
Right. Right. Well, Jim, thank you for being on the show. You're an awesome guest. And once again, the book Innovation Stack, I just think whether you're in a company or a startup, or it just really defines what makes your product, your idea, your service unique. And I just thought it was just a very powerful book. And the stories you tell of some of the great heroes in our entrepreneurial world were also fantastic. So thank you for putting your energies into that, for being on the show, and for really giving back, because you're trying to give entrepreneurs back something so that more people will cross that line. And I, as an entrepreneur, I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for helping me spread the word, because that's literally what I'm focused on right now is getting these ideas in the heads of as many people as we can, because I think we need more folks who are willing to do new stuff to solve problems. That's the whole goal.
That's how the world gets better, I guess. Right. So, okay, Jim, thank you very much.
What a pleasure, Rob. Thanks.